Okay, it is 5 o'clock. We are going to go ahead and get started with our live event, Facebook Live, about ADHD myths versus facts. ADHD is one of those disorders that you probably have heard about. At least you've heard those initials. And it is one of the most misunderstood diagnoses as well. Let's start by just talking about what ADHD is. First, let's make just a really important distinction. As clinicians, as therapists, we use a book that's called the DSM. It's the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. We're on the fifth edition. Whoop, there we go. Fifth edition of the DSM. So the Diagnostical Statistical Manual version 5 is what we're on right now. And the DSM-5 has actually made a new distinction that there is no longer a diagnosis of what's called ADD, so attention deficit disorder. Now it's ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and there's two different types. We'll get into that in just a moment, but first let's break down what ADHD means and what that translates to. So ADHD stands for attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Let's just use those words to understand what we're talking about. Attention. That's your ability to focus on one thing. And right now in our world today, giving specific attention, giving designated focus to one thing at a time is a skill that is really difficult. There are so many things vying for our attention at all different times. There are things trying to break our focus. Social media, as we're scrolling, is just 7-second clips. And so we are not required to focus very often in everyday life. Right now, attention, giving focus to one task for an extended period of time is a skill that you have to build. So attention is that focus. Deficit means that there's a problem, that there is some sort of shortcoming as to what is expected. So it is a deficit, a shortcoming, a problem with your attention, a problem with your ability to focus, a shortcoming with your ability to focus. Attention deficit. Hyperactive. That means that you move around a lot more than what would be considered normal or what would be considered healthy. Hyperactive. That you are overly stimulated, that you are overly moving. Hyper means more than, and active means movement. And then disorder means that it causes a problem. That is one of the most important distinctions in any disorder, is that it has to cause a problem. If your child is fidgety, if they are restless, if they have difficulty focusing, but they complete all their schoolwork, they're able to have and maintain friendships, and they can listen and follow instructions, they do not have ADHD. They may have some attention difficulties, they may have some hyperactive tendencies, but that does not mean that they have a disorder. Disorder means that your life is out of order or out of alignment. So if it is not causing your life to be out of alignment, it's not a disorder. You can have someone who fidgets a lot, who squirms a lot, who likes to be up and pacing. And guess what? If they're an athlete, go for it. That's okay. If they're a professional athlete, go ahead, run around, do whatever you need to do. If you are an artist, then guess what? It's okay that you kind of go from one thing right to the next. And there are all sorts of reasons why ADH never goes to the disorder side. That maybe you do have some problems focusing for extended periods of time. Sitting down and watching a full movie is really hard. Maybe you fidget more than you'd like to. But if it's not causing disorder, if it's not causing your life to be out of alignment, then it's not a disorder. So that's what ADHD stands for. Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. And then, like I said, the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the thing that we go by to diagnose various mental health disorders, no longer has ADD, attention deficit disorder, but it has two types of ADHD. One is called the inattentive type. This is the type where it's difficult to focus, where giving specific attention to one thing is hard. It can sometimes be hard to follow through with instructions, and this one also has a criteria that, for the most part, someone doesn't like giving mental, doesn't like exerting themselves mentally, like focusing on one problem for an extended period of time or on a difficult problem is something that they push back against. That's the inattentive type. Then there's the hyperactive type. That hyperactive type, that's the one that most people think about. It's the one where you're fidgety and you're squirming. It's hard to sit down in a chair. You want to be up and moving around. And it's typically the one that teachers have more difficulty with. Both of these, both the inattentive type and the hyperactive type, are caused by a lack of what is called dopamine. Dopamine in the brain. Now, dopamine is a chemical responsible for a lot of different things. There's lots of chemicals in the brain that do all sorts of different things. Well, dopamine is a chemical that is all about pleasure. And what it does is it helps the brain build up pleasure. It helps the brain seek pleasure in appropriate ways. And because of a lack of dopamine in the brain of someone who has ADHD is lacking in dopamine, so they are constantly seeking pleasure in a lot of different areas all at once. Whereas someone with a standard level of dopamine is able to just seek pleasure with their eyes, or just seek pleasure with their ears, or just seek pleasure with their hands by either playing with a toy or listening to instruction or watching a movie. That can be ways that you can seek pleasure. Reading a book. You can focus on one pleasure-seeking sense at a time. Well, if you have a decreased level of dopamine in the brain, then your brain is wanting to seek dopamine in your hearing and your sight and your speech and your touch and your movement all at the same time, because it's trying to overcompensate for that lack of dopamine in the brain. Putting all that together, ADHD is caused by a lack of dopamine in the brain, which causes someone to seek out sensory or positive or pleasure experiences in a lot of different ways all at once, rather than being able to focus on one thing at a time. That's what dopamine does in the brain, and that's where ADHD actually comes from. Let's talk just a bit about the criteria for ADHD. Then we're going to get into some myths about ADHD. So this is just a abbreviated, that's the word I was looking for, an abbreviated criteria for ADHD. But here's what you can think about. And the thing that we hear all the time as clinicians is, I think my child has ADHD because they can't pay attention at school. Or my child has ADHD because they don't do their homework. Or my child has ADHD because they just can't sit still. Those things in and of themselves does not mean that a child, and that's specifically what I'm talking about today, is ADHD with children. You can talk about this with adults as well, and it is a very common diagnosis among adults. But let's talk today about the diagnostic criteria for children or young adults. Here's what it says. There have to be at least 6 of these criteria for at least 6 months. So if it's just that your child just started school and they're having difficulty sitting still and focusing, they do not have ADHD because it hasn't been long enough for us to diagnose that. Or if they only have a few of these things and not at least 6, then that also means they do not have ADHD. It may be something else. Here is the criteria for the inattentive type of ADHD. There have to be at least, there's Stark. He's getting a little distracted today. There have to be at least 6 of these for at least 6 months. Here's the criteria, at least 6 of these. Number one, makes careless mistakes. Let me calm Stark down. Stark, enough. Number one, they make careless mistakes. Number two, they cannot sustain attention. Number three, does not seem to listen. Number four, often does not follow through. So they might start something and not finish it. Number five, struggles to organize tasks. Number six, dislikes mental effort. That's that thing that we were talking about for just a moment earlier, where difficult problems or problems that take longer, that is not something that they enjoy. Dislikes mental effort. Or if they're trying something and they're not immediately good at it, give it up. That's that disliking of mental effort. Loses objects necessary for tasks. This is not just lost some random item, but losing keys, losing a wallet, losing a phone, losing homework, losing things that are necessary for tasks. Distractible. Not just that if you're trying to get their attention that they'll look over or whatever, but even things that would not be distracting to most people are distractible to them, where they might see a bright color or they might see just a tiny little bit of movement, different things like that, very distractible. And lastly, forgetful. There have to be at least 6 of those things to be diagnosed with the inattentive type of ADHD. Here's the hyperactive or impulsive type criteria. Again, there have to be at least 6 of these criteria met for at least 6 months. So again, if it's a brand new thing, it is likely not ADHD. Here's the criteria. There have to be at least 6 of these. Number 1, fidgets. Well, we'll talk about fidgeting in just a bit. But number 1 is fidgets. Number 2, leaves seat. So when they're supposed to be seated, it just doesn't seem like they can do that. They get up and they actually walk away. It's not that they seem like they want to get up, but they will actually get up out of their seat and move. Runs or climbs, and the caveat in this is when it is not appropriate to do so. If you have a child that just likes to run, likes to climb, all that, that can be completely developmentally appropriate. Unable to remain quiet, not just chooses to be loud, but unable to remain quiet. When they are being given direction in class, this is the child that is constantly, not just sometimes, constantly blurting out. They are unable to remain quiet. On the go as if driven by a motor. In this one, you can think of the old commercials with the Energizer Bunny where they just keep going and going and going and going. And sometimes you can look at the children who are diagnosed with ADHD, this hyperactive impulsive type, and it's like, oh my goodness, how in the world? They must have something special inside of them that is just running them. It seems like they're being driven by a motor. Talks excessively. And again, this is in times when it is inappropriate to do so. If a child just wants to share a story with you and they just keep going and going and going and going and going, guess what? That's appropriate. That's completely okay. This is talking excessively when it's inappropriate to do so. Blurts out answers. This is something you can watch for in classes in school. It kind of goes along with that, unable to remain quiet and talking excessively, just blurting out answers. Cannot wait for their turn. So if you're playing a game, you're playing Uno, and they are just constantly laying their card down as if it's their turn. And it's not that they're trying to cheat. They're not trying to get ahead. They are just, I said cheat, strange, didn't I? It's not that they're trying to cheat. It's not that they're trying to cheat. It's not that they're trying to get ahead in the game. They are just really having a hard time tracking when it's their turn to go. And then finally, they interrupt or intrude without thinking. So it's not a child who just comes over and interrupts a conversation. We know that children do that, and it's developmentally appropriate to do that. And you have to guide that child to understand when it's their turn to talk. But this is a child who would barge right into a conversation and just start saying whatever. And even as they're being directed, like, hey, we're having a conversation, it's not your turn right now, they just can't seem to stop. Again, there have to be at least 6 of those things in either section for at least 6 months. Not just, oh, they fidget a lot. Not just, oh, it seems like they're distractible. But there have to be at least 6 of those criteria for at least 6 months. I hope that you're starting to see and understand that ADHD is much more than just a fidgety child or a child who has difficulty sitting all the way through a movie. Both of those things are completely developmentally appropriate for children and most people of all ages. Let's go into some myths, and we can kind of talk about how those myths line up with the criteria. Myth number 1, a child having a hard time focusing has ADHD. If we just looked at that criteria, there have to be at least 6 of those things met. If it is just that a child is having a hard time focusing, there are all sorts of reasons why that might be the case. Number 1, they might just be bored. Either their teacher is bored, either their teacher may be boring, you in the way that you're giving instructions may be boring, or they may be so far ahead of something in their mind, and they may be gifted, they may be beyond what is being taught or what is being learned or what is being discussed, and so it's hard for them to remain focused. It doesn't mean that they have ADHD just because they are not focusing on what you want a child to focus on. Children are interested in all sorts of different things. Adults, you are interested in all sorts of different things. If you loved, as a student, if you loved math, then probably when you went to English, it was much more difficult for you to remain focused. When you were in school, if you loved English, when you went to math, it was probably very difficult for you to remain focused. So it's okay to enjoy different things, and it's okay to have different levels of focus for different things. Just because a child can't remain focused in one subject more than others does not mean that they have ADHD. They might be bored. They may be excited. It might be that they're thinking about what's going to come after the thing that's going on right now. And so, yes, it's hard to focus. If a child knows they get to play after dinner, this happens all the time with my niece and nephew when we're eating family meals. I love eating with them. I love sitting and eating with them. And sometimes the rest of the family is just like, oh my gosh, what's going on? They just want to go to play. Well, of course they would rather go and play. They're excited to go do the next thing. It doesn't mean that they have ADHD. And another reason that a child may have a difficulty focusing, or that someone, an adult, anyone may have difficulty focusing, is because of some anxiety. If you are anxious about something that is coming up, or if you are anxious about something that's on your mind, it's going to be difficult to focus on the task at hand because you will always be preempted by that anxiety. So a lot of times what people think is ADHD in children actually turns out to be anxiety in children. Now next month on November 13th, I'm going to be doing the same type of thing for anxiety disorders. Myths versus facts about anxiety. So tune in for that, and we can talk more about how anxiety looks in children and adults and what can be done about it. But there's lots of reasons why a child or anyone may have difficulty focusing. They could be bored, they could be excited, they could be anxious, or it could just be something that they're not interested in. So myth number 1, a child having a hard time focusing has ADHD. That is not true. Again, there have to be at least 6 of those criteria met for at least 6 months. Myth number 2, a child who squirms and fidgets has ADHD. Now, one of the criteria for ADHD, the hyperactive impulsive type, did say fidgets. So that is something to look for. But fidgeting alone does not constitute ADHD. Again, I will say this over and over and over and over again. There have to be at least 6 of those criteria met. At least 6. So if it is just a fidgety child, guess what? That is completely developmentally appropriate. We as adults also fidget. Sometimes we take notes while someone is talking. That's a way to fidget. Sometimes we click a pen. That's a way to fidget. Sometimes we're just moving in our seat. That's a way to fidget. Sometimes we get up and we walk out and we go to the bathroom. Guess what? That's a way to fidget. All of those things are completely appropriate, both developmentally and in life, and it does not constitute ADHD. As a matter of fact, fidgeting helps loosen up different parts of the brain. That's why it's so great at a lot of workplaces now. They are providing fidgets for employees to use during meetings because they found that fidgeting actually helps plug some of those dopamine sensors so that you can focus on the one. If you're trying to look and listen, then having a fidget in your hand plugs that dopamine receptor for the brain for that sense so that you can give even more attention to your sight and your hearing. So it does not mean that a child has ADHD just because they like to fidget. It could be that they are fidgeting in order to pay attention better. They're not being distracted by their fidgeting. That fidgeting is helping them to focus. And if that's the case, guess what? They figured out a way to deal with it. It's not causing any sort of disalignment in their life. It is not a disorder, and they don't have ADHD. So just fidgeting does not mean that a child has ADHD. As a matter of fact, Albert Einstein, long before we knew all that we know about ADHD, had a theory that he called combinatory play. Combinatory play, and he defined it as this: the act of opening up one mental channel by dabbling in another. Guess what? Now we have the scientific language for that. It is dopamine, getting the receptors of dopamine being plugged up so that you can focus on another mental channel, another dopamine receptor. You can open up the dopamine receptors that you're trying to open up and plug the ones that you're trying to plug. So even Albert Einstein said that combinatory play is completely developmentally appropriate and acceptable. We need to allow children to fidget, to get out some of their energy, and to open up one mental channel by dabbling in another, because as adults, we let other adults do it, so we need to start allowing children to do it as well. So myth number 2, a child who squirms and fidgets has ADHD. No. There have to be many more criteria in that. Myth number 3, this one's a tough one. A child whose teacher says they have ADHD has ADHD. This one is tough. I absolutely love working with teachers. It's part of my everyday job that I go in, I do classroom consultations, I do behavior consultations, I do individualized education plans, I do behavior improvement plans, I do all sorts of things with teachers. But just because a teacher says a child has ADHD does not mean that a child has ADHD. Typically, we have to see this difficulty focusing, or these behaviors, these criteria being met in multiple situations. It can't just be at school. If it's only at school, then we need to talk about some supports in the school environment. It's not that the child has a problem. It could be that there are supports that need to be in place so that the child can thrive. It doesn't mean that the child has ADHD. So it does have to be in multiple situations. Also, teachers are not trained to diagnose mental disorders. Now they can be, and they are so great at being first alerters to a problem. They do such great work at reporting things that they see, that they want the children that they work with to get help. But they are not trained to diagnose mental health disorders. They can be first alerters to a problem. So if you are a teacher and you are watching this, please let me encourage you. Thank you so much for all of the work that you do with children. And thank you so much for being so concerned for the children that you work with. And thank you so much for being a first alerter to the problems that you see. But here's what I'm going to ask. If you are a parent and you are asking a teacher about what they see at school, or if you are a teacher and you are giving information about what you see at school, I'm going to ask that if you're that parent, you don't ask the teacher's opinion of what might be going on. And if you're a teacher, I'm going to ask that you not give your opinion about what you think is going on, because that is overstepping where you are trained to deal with that child. What you can do is describe specific behaviors that you witness. Not what you think those behaviors mean, but specific behaviors that you witness in the child. If you will do that, then when the parent comes to a trained clinician to get a diagnosis, they can say, and also their teacher says that they're fidgety, that they got up from their seat, that they're just really having a hard time focusing, even when it seems like it's something that they're interested in. Now we can take that information and we can use it to diagnose. But if the teacher jumps to a diagnosis, a lot of times that can cause some confusion in the parent's brain when they come to us and we diagnose them with an anxiety disorder, or they come to us and we diagnose them with a sensory processing difficulty. So I'm going to ask that if you are a teacher and I know that you love and care for your students, the best thing you can do is describe specific behavior. And if you are a parent, the best thing that you can do is ask for descriptions of specific behavior, not opinions of what you think that those behaviors mean. Myth number 4. That was myth number 3. So a child whose teacher says they have ADHD must have ADHD. That is a myth. Number 4, my child has ADHD. The solution is a pill. That is not the case. While there are some great medications for ADHD in children, I can say that it is not the only solution. It is not always the best solution, and medication alone can be very damaging rather than helpful. With ADHD, the best solution for helping a child is threefold. Medication can be a part of that. If a psychiatrist or a physician decides that for a child that medication is going to be a best part of their treatment, great. But they may also say, let's try other things first. With my clients, I say that they need to see me between 4 and 6 times before we'll talk about medication intervention, because sometimes it's just not needed. But medication can be part of that. But what needs to be a part of it is therapy and accommodations. Therapy and accommodations, along with medication, will help so much. Just medication alone does not teach the child how to regulate themselves when the medication isn't working. Or when it's a really difficult situation, that child is going to have to add their own self-regulation to what the medication is doing, and then they'll be able to regulate. So therapy will help with that self-regulation, and then accommodations will help the child in those situations where it is really difficult for them to stay focused or stay seated or stay whatever it may be. I had a teacher in high school. His name is Mr. Huber, and you know what? I'm going to drop his name because I don't think that he would mind it. Sometimes he watches our content. And Mr. Huber said, there is nothing more unfair than the equal treatment of unequals. That doesn't mean that some kids are better than others. What it means is that no child is the same. So if you treat them all exactly the same, that may seem like a great thing to you, but there is nothing more unfair than the equal treatment of unequals. Some children need more accommodations. Some children need to be able to take breaks during class. Some children need to be able to wear a headphone in their ear. Some children need to be able to have fidgets. That doesn't mean you have to allow everyone to do the same thing, and it doesn't mean that everybody has the same accommodation. What it means is that accommodating for different things in different children will help all children thrive. Myth number 4, my child has ADHD. The solution is a pill. That is not the case. Medication alone rarely works long term. And myth number 5, and this is one that we'll end with, ADHD is funny. It can be, to watch it. There are some times where um, I'm working with clients that have ADHD, and they are laughing. And because they are laughing at what's going on because of their disorder, then I can laugh at what's going on because of their disorder. But most of the time, someone struggling with ADHD would not say that what they're struggling with is very funny. It's a disorder. It means it's causing life to feel out of alignment and in total chaos. And imagine, not that that's happening sometimes, but that it's happening in almost every situation, almost all of the time. And if that was your brain, if your brain was constantly just firing and unable, not just difficult, unable to slow down or stop, it's not fun. And it's not funny. It's a disorder. So we do also need to make sure that when we're talking about disorders, ADHD or anything else, that we're aware that the people struggling with those disorders are struggling. To them, it's not very funny. So if you're just walking around and flippantly saying, "Oh, I have ADHD, it may be somewhat hurtful to the people who do struggle with that disorder." Myth number 1, a child having a hard time focusing has ADHD. Not true. Myth number 2, a child who squirms and fidgets has ADHD. Not true. Myth number 3, a child whose teacher says they have ADHD has ADHD. Not true. Myth number 4, my child has ADHD, the solution is a pill. Not true. Myth number 5, ADHD is funny. Not true. And the final myth that I'll leave you with is that ADHD means that there is no hope. Absolutely not true. If you believe that you or a child that you know or a child that means a lot to you has ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and you are not their parent, then reach out to their parent and explain the behaviors that you are noticing and see if the parent is open to getting them in to a clinician to be diagnosed with either ADHD or whatever may be going on. If you are a parent of a child who you believe does have ADHD, then feel free to reach out to a clinician in your area to describe the behaviors that you're seeing and see what diagnosis a clinician can come up with. I hope that today you were able to learn more about what ADHD is in about 30 minutes. That was a great overview. I hope that you were able to understand a little bit more and that this is able to help you help others. At MisterStuTV, we provide creative and engaging moments discussing mental health because we believe all children deserve to be seen, heard, understood, known, and loved, whether they have ADHD or any other number of things or not. All children deserve to be seen, heard, understood, known, and loved. Because of that, we provide mental health fun for kids. We provide mental health resources for parents. And we provide mental health training for professionals. For more information, you can always check us out on all social media at MisterStuTV. And you can also check out MisterStuTV.com. That's MisterStuTV. Thanks so much. On November 13th, we'll be talking about anxiety, myths, and facts. And then back here on December 11th, live at 5, we will be talking about raising resilient kids. I hope that you'll join us for both of those things. November 13th, 5 p.m., anxiety, myths, and facts, and December 11th, 5 p.m., raising resilient kids. I'll see you back here, and until next time, remember, all children deserve to be seen, heard, understood, known, and loved, and you can share the love. Peace.